Welcome back to Stamping at the Warren, and I'm Kim Tolton, and today I'm going to be sharing with you a very vintage styled card, and I've only got a photo of it because I made it ages ago and then realised the original I had sent off to a friend. And so therefore I don't have the original. I did actually design this quite a while ago, and I thought, well, before the catalogue ends, because this stamp set is on the retiring list and it's just adorable. It's one of my most favourite ever. So there's a little sneak peek, and we're using quite a few products, but if you know, you can replicate it at home, I'm sure. But a lot of the products, if not all of the products I'm showing you today, are actually in the retiring bin, apart from the cardstock. So I'm going to start by showing you all the products you're going to need. So first of all, you will need the Everything Eleanor stamp set. And I'm so sad that this one is retiring. It will stay with me forever because I just love the whole stamp set. I really love this flourish. So I know it will never leave here anyway. So that's your first stamp set. Your second stamp set is the tin of cards. And it's a lovely one that's designed to go with the file folder tabs. So that you can make a tin of cards that you have ready to rock and roll or give as a gift. And there's something really lovely and updating about this stamp set and the bundle that's coming in the new catalogue, but I'm not saying more than that. Right, after that you will need some Venetian lace trim, because you can't do vintage for a woman and not have a bit of lace trim, can you? Then you will need a blossom accent. Gorgeous, they're retiring as well, as is the crystal effects, which I use to actually adhere the blossom accent. So, oh, I'm just finding it. So there's the crystal effects. Then you need some basic rhinestones, and I'm using Tip Top Taupe, but any sort of neutral marker. The striped scallop thinlits dies, the extra large oval punch, and is that it in terms of major products? And then we're using Tip Top Taupe and Rose Red, I'm sorry, tongue tied there for a moment, Rose Red and Tip Top Taupe ink pads. So that is all your products. And then with regard to your cardstock, you will need, and you'll need some paper snips as well. We're doing a bit of fussy cutting. So you will need some scrap of Rose Red, and you will also need a piece of Tip Top, or this is actually Sahara sand I'm using here, Sahara sand, and that's going to be for the label. And then you've got some spare Sahara sand cardstock. You also want some spare very vanilla cardstock. And then for your main card you need a piece of craft cardstock, again going with that vintage theme, and this measures 21 centimetres by 14.8 centimetres, and then you just fold in half where you score and use a bone folder just to do that, and that's your card base made. Then the pieces of cardstock you want a piece of Rose Red cardstock measuring 14 0.4 by 10.1 centimetres all of this is going to be on my blog, so don't worry. Then you need a piece of very vanilla cardstock measuring 14 by 9.7 centimetres and a piece of Sahara sand cardstock measuring the same, so 14 by 9.7 centimetres. That's kind of everything that we're going to be using. Did I show you the, yeah I did show you the sparklies. So it's actually a lot easier to make than you would imagine. So let's get on with it, shall we? So we're going to start by stamping that very vanilla panel. And we're going to do that using the larger flower stamp from Everything Eleanor stamp set, and we're going to use the rose red, so we're keeping it all nicely coordinated. So a combination of the rose red with some nice neutrals, and we're going to be using off the page and first, second, third generation stamping techniques, which I'll quickly explain as we go. So stamping off the page means you stamp but you don't leave a complete image. And then your first to third or first to fourth generation stamping just means that you then stamp once, twice, 3 times for before you re-ink your stamp. So that would be first, second and third generation stamping. If you include that one, it would have been fourth generation stamping. And then on top of all of that, we're going to be doing random stamping. And I don't want any more of these very intense ones, so I'm actually going to stamp off onto my grid paper. And then random stamping is really twisting and turning, stamp off a little bit again, twisting and turning the stamp and the cardstock so it the pattern is completely random. So that panel can now be mapped down onto here, says she. Did I have another red panel? I might have to trim this piece down. Let's have a look. I bet I've done 14 by 9.7, so this needs to be 14.4, so I obviously didn't cut that properly. So out comes the trimmer. So it's 14.4. We are talking about real slithers of card here, by 9.7. 9.5, 6, 7. There you go. I did tell you I got all of this prepared ages ago, and I should have taken a check. And I bet it's going to be this piece that's too, yeah, it's that piece that's too small. Oh my goodness. Right. Let's just take a strip off. There we go. Double check. Just a touch off there. That's my fault. I just assumed. Never assume. That's what I say. Never assume you got it right when you first did it. I should have checked it all. Right. So this can go straight down on here. But before I do, we're going to wrap a piece of that Venetian lace trim around. So you just want this a bit longer, about a centimetre or so longer than the piece of cardstock. And because this is quite thin, this one, I am going to use just a tiny bit of tear and tape just on the back of the cardstock. You just want it roughly in the middle, turn it over, and then just tear off 2 tiny pieces of tear and tape just to secure that ribbon on the back. Another tiny bit for that side. Just make sure it's still level. Yeah. Because it's quite common you end up turning it over and it's going at a wonk. Okay. So there's your top panel with the lace on. Bit of fast fuse there just to secure this down onto the other panel. I'm just going to do a bit on each side because of the lace, so you just want to make sure it holds down nicely. And there's that panel down there. Next, you just want a scrap of very vanilla cardstock, and we're going to stamp some more flowers, which again I'm going to stamp off some ink, and then 1, 2, that's all I'm doing, and we're going to be cutting those out. So paper snips, I find it easier to cut them into singles, and remember that you twist the cardstock and not the scissors, so it gives a much nicer finish. You also want to leave just 1 or 2 millimeters edge around the outside of the stamped border, and that allows the flowers to sort of pop up on their own. It's a bit like the faded leaves on a rose, and the outside leaves blanch before the inner leaf, or the inner petals I should say, and it's just creating a similar sort of halo effect around the petals. You can see it doesn't take very long. You don't have to be incredibly precise, but you do want it reasonably. So there's 1, and then the second one. I did try it with 3, but because there's quite a lot going on with this card, it was too overcrowded, so I decided to dispense with the 3rd flower. There goes my husband, and he's very nicely belching on the video. How lovely of him. I don't know. He's just said excuse me, so he should. My word, how embarrassing. I bet your husbands do that to you as well. Maybe not videoing. He usually knows that if the door of the workshop's shut, he's not supposed to come in. But I suppose he thought it was not included because he was leaning through the window, because it's a nice day. I don't know. Men. Can't live with them, can't live without them, eh? I do love mine very much though. He just has his moments, as we all do. Right, there's your 2 flowers. Okie dokie. So now we are going to be doing some die cutting first. So we are going to need that striped scallop there. It's a lovely die, look. very intricate. I find I don't need to use the oh my goodness, the brain's gone dead. I don't find I need to use wax paper for this. I find it works quite well on its own. Now the one thing that you will need is to make sure that the top of those scallops are on the cardstock, otherwise it looks a little bit odd at the top. Get it as centrally as you can. I'm using a magnetic plate, and I just make sure that it goes through backwards and forwards a couple of times. And if you hear big clumps, that's perfectly fine. That just tells you your big shot is cutting through that card as you want it to be doing. So I'm making this, I'm die cutting this using the Sahara sand cardstock. Right. So if you look, all these little bits punch out. And if I was to wrap this against the edges of my table, I'd have all these little bits popping out everywhere, but I'm just going to quickly pop them out. I suppose you could use these. They'd probably make little owls and little things like that. It probably would have been quicker just to wrap this out on the side of the table, but I didn't fancy sweeping it all up at the end. It just makes it a bit easier for the die to come out then. So once all of these bits are out, I'm just going to get rid of them all, not my flour. Now you do, I left one in, two in. Now you do need three even. Right, now you do need to give this a whack. So you have the metal side to the table and just give it a good wrap on the back, and it has loosened up the cardstock. So you just give, and actually I've got wax paper underneath this. I've just realised that I obviously didn't take out the die last time. There you go. And then if it starts getting a bit tough, just go through, pop in with your paper piercing tool just on the little holes there, and it will slowly come off. Be gentle. Nothing worse than going to all the trouble and then it all tears on you. It's going to be awkward now. It's because I've got that piece of... There we go. Just gently as you go. So it is a rather intricate die, as you can see, but a little bit of patience. Off it comes. You can see here where I'd obviously used wax paper before. Now I have a tendency to keep those, and I do use those on cards and the such like, but this is a piece that we want, and that is going to go down on top here, just so. So all I need to do with my paper snips is just gently snip off these very bottom bits here. And that will go on. Just so. and it just makes a lovely little overlay. So I'm using the thinner, the fine tip glue pen here, and you need very little of this stuff, very little indeed. So be very gentle as you go round. Don't go squeezing the nipple too hard, otherwise there'll be glue everywhere and then you'll just have a gluey mess. Just work your way round. Doesn't take long. We're going to be putting some elements over the top of this, and they themselves will hold this down as well. Right, there we go. Make sure you get it the right way up. You want the curved bits at the top. So it looks like a lattice fence panel. There you go. And if there's any bits just sticking over, just pop them off with your paper snips. Just missed a couple there. So that is that bit. Right, so now we're going to do the label. So let's put him one side so he stays safe. I'm terrible at losing dies. Right, next we're going to be making these elements in the centre here. So we've got an oval with the sentiment, and then there's a stamped label, and then I've made an outer bit for that. So we want that scrap of Sahara sand and this larger stamp here, and we're going to stamp that with Tip Top Taupe. Just like so. And because we're cutting this out, it doesn't matter whereabouts you do that. And it just gives a gradient which will just poke out from everything else. Out come your paper snips. I always like to start with a corner. I don't know why, I just do. And then work my way around. So this is quite a simple design, just to work your way around. You could use crumb cake or Tip Top Taupe cardstock. I did try different ones. This was just the colour I decided I liked the best because it works really well with a very vanilla cardstock, and it also works really well with the rose red and Tip Top Taupe. And I do like my cards to be nicely coordinated, and I'm sure you all do too. And although this does look complicated at first glance, I would expect somebody to be able to recreate this card in one of my classes in their very first class. I get people rubber stamping straight away and die cutting and punching. So I always ensure that those three elements are always present in my first class or demonstration. If I go to craft fairs, then I get people doing it as a make and take, and I incorporate these techniques into it because so many people are frightened of making themselves look silly, and so they say, oh no, I can't do it, I can't do it, I'm not creative. And actually, I don't think you need to be overly creative when you've got so many places that you can get some fab ideas from. There's actually no need. So I'm just checking. Right, so I've cut the label out. You can see the different texture it creates on there. I'm going to use a bit of fast fuse to stick this onto the rose red cardstock. If I can find the fast fuse, there we go. So I stick that down on there, and then out comes the scissors again, and I just repeat that process, but this time I leave a couple of millimeters around the rose red, and that will create your layered label. And obviously we're doing this in real time. I always go with my videos unplugged, so I never stop my videos unless I'm actually physically disturbed during a video. I just roll with the video, because I think personally it's important that you see that even experienced people make cock-ups. We're human after all. And you can see how quickly you can make a card as well. And the hardest part about card making is coming up with the ideas. That is what takes the time, not the actual card making. And sometimes you can have a complete mental block. Creativity just seems to escape you. And so for that purpose, on my Pinterest account, one of my boards is all templates for cards and scrapbooks. So when creativity escapes, I can whiz on there, and you can whiz on there, and you can get your creative. If you can get the framework as in a template, then the rest tends to follow okay. And because Stampin' Up does everything in coordinated, you don't even have to think too much about that. Right, so next we're going to stamp the sentiment, and I'm using this sentiment just because from the tin of cards stamp set. And just stamp that down, and then get out that punch, get it on there as centrally as you can, punch. Next, get out your marker and use not the brush tip but the fine tip. Now Stampin' Up helps you out. So what you will find is if you get where the name of the marker is, you will see one end it's got a picture of a brush tip, and the other end it's got a picture of a fine tip. So that really helps you out when you're going to open up your pens. And all I've done is free-handed, almost like a stitched edge, and stitching is very on trend at the moment with paper craft. And I don't find you have to be particularly precise with this. You obviously want it to be a relatively even line and fairly even stitch lengths, or faux stitch lengths. There you go, it doesn't have to be over the top. So this is going to sit on here, popped up with a couple of Stampin' Dimensionals. So that goes onto your label. And then a couple of stamping dimensionals on the back of that. And that can then go down on your card base. I use my thumbs for measuring, up between my thumb and forefinger. That's how I centre things up, not with a ruler. We now need one of those little blossom accents. And I'm going to go with the tip-top tool just to keep it nicely coordinated. Now I've been very naughty lot. I've been sitting here and I haven't put my lid back on my fine tip glue pen. It is a must, otherwise that tiny little tube there will clog up and then you're in trouble because it doesn't have a pin that comes with it. Right, so we need some crystal effects. Now this stuff does clog up really easy, and I find a little poke with a pokey tool opens it up just fine, and then you just want a little drop, just that much, tiny amount. Just pop that down and hold it down. And that is bonded. It's not quite dry, so don't go playing with it too much, but it is bonded. Right, and then the last thing is our little flowers here. So I'm going to put one up here and the other here. Okay, so this one I'm going to use just a bit of fast fuse. I use fast fuse all the time, and I think it's because my table is black and the fast fuse is black. I have a tendency to lose it terribly. So just pop one flower in here. Okay. Stamping dimensional on the back of this flower. And we'll pop this one down here. And then we need our sparklies, which I've put down somewhere. Can you see them? What have I done? My rhinestones, there they are. Goodness gracious me. Right, so you just need your paper piercing tool again and a few basic rhinestones, just 3 in each of those flowers in the centre there. So 3 there, 3 there. There you go. And then you just need your card base. Fast fuse. You could use tear and tape or Tombow. Well, you've probably guessed by now, I love fast fuse. I really didn't. I didn't take to it first of all, because I just used to get into such a sticky mess. But the trick is you run it and you flick one way, and next time you run it down and you flick the opposite way. And by doing that, you don't get in an inky mess. And then that goes down on your card base. And there is today's card. How about that? I know it's a bit of a fiddle, but for me, this is a really special card. It's just one of those cards that you just think that needs to be for something special. And the just because lends itself to any occasion. Don't forget that you can get all of my social media details in the Show More section underneath today's blog, which includes information on my online store for Stampin' Up products and my community Pinterest board, which if you just follow the board, and so long as I see you are interested in papercraft, I'll send you an invitation to start pinning, and then it's up to you really whether you want to join or not. And otherwise, all of today's tutorial will be up on my blog, which goes live at the same time as the video, and there will be a link from the video to the blog. So right underneath where it's got an image of the video, there'll be a link there. But also whilst you're watching the video, there will be a little eye icon in the top right corner. If you hover over that, a little card will show up. Click on the card and it will take you through to today's project on my blog. So different ways of finding me. And that's it for today. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch, and I'll see you again tomorrow. Thanks a lot. Bye.